West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
As part of their curriculum, as we are talking about, they're asked to bring in pictures of their family to school, which they pull on bulletin boards, and they get up and they speak about their families. By doing that, they're bringing up sexual orientation. It's not about sex, it's about the families.
The Florida legislature has successfully manufactured something that fearmongers and talking heads can only dream of, and that is a legitimate slippery slope. Genuinely ask yourself, who is next year's target?
Welcome back to the Sunday Show. I'm Jonathan Capehart. What began last year as a manufactured GOP moral panic against critical race theory being taught to public school children, something you already know does not happen, has since morphed into a national fervor for book bans and state legislatures cranking out obtuse, hateful legislation aimed at making illegal the teaching of or even talking about some ideas and identities that, quote, discomfort some groups of people. Because it was never just about race. Take Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, currently making its way through that state's legislature, which would essentially make it illegal for some LGBTQ plus students to simply talk about their identities in the classroom. Not surprisingly, Governor DeSantis has signaled his support for the bill. But in the face of it all, progressive parents and other activists nationwide are saying not so fast as they mobilize and strategize to fight back against this classroom culture war. Joining me now, Melanie Willingham-Jaggers, Executive Director of GLSEN, which supports LGBTQ students, and Julie Collins, an Ohio regional organizer with Red, Wine, and Blue, a group fighting the widespread book bans. Thank you both very, very much for coming to the Sunday Show. Julie, let me start with you. You're part of a network of 300,000 other women pushing back against the grassroots level, against a very organized Republican Party. How are you fighting that battle, and how can the National Democratic Party help?
Well, we have our campaign called Book Ban Busters, and what that is it's a website where we have a interactive map with showing of all of the book bans across the country, and it's in 44 states, by the way. And this is sponsored by our group, Red, Wine, and Blue. So we have that. What we do with the with this website is we invite the moms across the country to join us for trainings. We have our troublemaker trainings that we have every Thursday evening. And we also have other opportunities for them to get together and learn how to mobilize in their communities to fight these bans.
And this troublemaker trainings is about getting folks to go to those school board meetings, even run for school board, so that they are part of that process. Am I have that right?
That's absolutely correct. That is correct. We want the ladies to get involved in their communities because these are the things that are important to them. They trust their teachers and they trust for them to create curriculum and to choose books for students that are appropriate for their age levels. It is really just not appropriate for right-wing groups out of Washington, D.C., led by Steve Bannon, to be choosing the reading in the classrooms across this country.
Lord have mercy, Steve Bannon as like chief librarian is a scary thought. Melanie, you are the brand new executive director of GLSEN, the first African American and first non-binary person to be in that role. And what a time to get to be in that position. Talk about, from your perspective, this Florida Don't Say Gay bill. I mean, I never thought in a million years that a legislature would try to legislate people's abilities to even talk about themselves and their families.
Yeah, this is exactly it. So listen, the story of our democracy is the story of the fight to include everyone, right? Black people, Indigenous people, people with disabilities, immigrants, and yes, LGBTQ plus people have always been here, have always been in the fight to include all of us, right? We are fighting for a country where all means all. Education is a cornerstone of our democracy, right? So if we are intent on miseducating the next participants, the next leaders, the next voters in our democracy, let's be clear at least about what we're trying to do. And then finally, I would say, safety is the baseline when it comes to education, right? We know what works. We know that it's about inclusive curriculum, right? This is the LGBTQ plus and race inclusive and family and community inclusive curriculum. We know that this is about supportive educators, supportive policies, and affirming clubs and peer spaces. And so given that we know what works, to ensure success in school and beyond, success in life, connection to community, let's at least be honest about what these bills are trying to accomplish when they take away the support, when they aim to strategically remove the supports that young people need to succeed in school, to connect to their communities, to be safe and affirmed.
I want to have you listen, Melanie, to a person who is testifying against this Don't Say Gay bill. We'll talk about it on the other side.
Yesterday, during a presentation, a young person said about this legislative body, "I feel like they want me dead." When older queer people represent themselves, it's because we want young people not to go through what we had to go through, not because we are trying to indoctrinate them.
And as an out gay man, I completely agree with that 100%. And whether young people who are decades younger than me or not realize this, things are a whole lot better today than they were when I first came out in the mid-'80s. And yet everyone's journey to knowing who they are is very personal and is very individual. But Melanie, your response to that bill opponent, what they said.
I completely agree. Coming out is the purpose of coming out is not necessarily for ourselves, right? Queer people have always been around. We've always lived. We've always had community. Coming out is really so that the people who are not yet out can see, right, the full, loving, happy, joyful, connected lives that queer people have and can have, right? So that in their own time, they too can have the access to that liberation, freedom, love, and community that those of us who are out can have. Now let's be clear about what this is intending to do. This is intending to scare children, to erase them, right? To have them think that there is something wrong with them. And these are adults making this argument that know better, right? This is really about adults looking to suppress, looking to erase, looking to, make afraid young people so that they never come out, so that they are convinced by this argument that they are wrong, they should not exist, et cetera. And you and me, we know better. And there are more of us than there are of them, right? So we know, and it is our job to make safe the world for our young people to come out to be exactly who they are.
Mm-hmm. And Julie, I want to dive in a little bit of time that we have left about some of the some of the things, some of the how-tos that you tell folks to do when they, especially if they go to a local school board meeting, but fact-based arguments only, organize in real time with text messages, no applause, jazz hands, which I want you to explain, and avoid and replace divisive language. But explain why no applause, jazz hands.
Well, number one, it can be distracting, and it can also limit your time. Most of the time when you testify or speak at a school board meeting, it is timed. And so you don't want to have a lot of folks clapping and taking away time for you to be able to get your point across. But Jonathan, I wanted to also make the point with you that our group is not just progressive moms. We are moms all over the country, and that we don't necessarily label ourselves. We really just care about our kids. Myself, as an example, I'm a wife, and I'm of a Gulf War veteran. I'm a mom. I am a juju to two wonderful little girls who are 9 and 7. And most of all, I'm a Black woman, and I am incensed at the fact that they are trying to erase my history, erase the whole reason why I'm here and how I got here to this place.
It is Monday, the 14th of February of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. That's right, because it has, after all, been a weekend. And Mondays is traditionally a time when some of the upper end eateries would be closed. And a lot of us decided, well, there's a ready-made clientele right there. All those cooks and people working in the restaurant industry that have Mondays off. But when you have leftovers left over from the weekend, which sometimes happens, well, you make it into a lovely, repurpose it is how we would put it, into a lovely gourmet delight. That's right, a gourmet delight. How are you? Did you have a nice Superb Owl weekend? Yes, the Superb Owl was trending yesterday. Much better than the Super Bowel. Oh my God, if that had been trending during the Super Bowl, I would have been a bit concerned. Charlie Kirk pretty much exposed his predilections for, solitary sexual activity, sexual anarchy. What the hell is that? Charlie Kirk. These Truppenjugends all have some really big issues with, shall we say, the act of love. Because Nazis don't believe in love. Oh, I know, sure, they look like us, and they all had, nice homes like us. Doilies on the sofa armrest even. But I think Nazis, by their very nature, are incapable of, shall we say, unconditional love. Because it goes against everything about what a Nazi is, and it ain't unconditional. It's all conditional. In a very violent and selfish way, we might add. So, yeah, there's that. And it looks like Charlie Kirk was quite upset with the Super Bowl halftime show because it was, I don't know. I was reading the timeline and all the other right-wing racists in America, who happen to be part of the MAGA cult, by the way. Just so happens to be. In fact, even the N-word was thrown about with the hard R spelled out. There was no asterisks in there. It was just right there. Still up right now. Been reported. Twitter hasn't gotten back to me and say, it doesn't violate our terms of use. What? Called the halftime show Enter Crap. Yep. And then others who just coincidentally happened to be part of the MAGA cult. How do I know this? Because they announced it. They announced it right there in their bio. Trump lover. Yeah, that's got to be a MAGA cultist. they were complaining that most of America, football and the halftime show was for like all of America, and most of America doesn't like the inner crap that was being forced down their throats. Forced down your throats. Look, that's the halftime show. It's an extended period of time for the Super Bowl. That's when you go and take a crap. You go and get the nachos all melted up for the second half. Come on. You don't have to sit there and whine about, this halftime show doesn't appeal to me. In fact, it makes me uncomfortable. I guess it'll be outlawed in Florida then, won't it? Maybe even Texas. Good thing it was in Inglewood. Speaking of which, where'd they get that effing water feature in Inglewood? Inglewood isn't anywhere near the beach. Jesus. Yeah, well, SoFi Stadium is built on the backs of all those people that have student loans at this very moment, accruing interest as we speak. So they can afford one of those fake water features. All right, well, that's the least of it. I mean, come on. Everybody knows when you landscape a property, it increases the value by, 10 million, 10, 20 million bucks on a stadium like that. So a water feature is a must. All right, well, I used to be a Rams fan. In fact, so much so I used to have season tickets, but they broke my heart every year. And at some point, you just have to cut it loose. If your heart keeps getting broken, why do you keep going back for the abuse? Now, maybe they didn't mean to be abusing we fans for so long. And I'm looking at you, Malavasi. Yeah, that's how far back I go. Anyway, just broke my heart every year. And then there was this kid playing for Notre Dame. And he looked pretty good. I kind of liked him. And then he went to the Niners. And that was around the time when I stopped. Well, did I stop getting my season tickets before my move to the Bay Area? I must have. But at some point, I did not renew my season tickets because the Rams broke my heart every year. This is when they played in Anaheim. And now I had been going to Rams games when they're playing in the Coliseum. I was a big Rams fan. I had an uncle that played for me. He was a lineman, Dwayne Putnam, All-Pro. And so yeah, I like the Rams. But then when Montana began to play for the Niners, and my move to the Bay Area coincided at that time as well, I started following Montana because I liked what he had done in his Notre Dame days. That's how I do it. So, I didn't have a so-called horse in the race in this particular Super Bowl. So, I wouldn't say the Super Bowl was in the background. But I wasn't watching it intently, scrutinizing in a microscopic way every single play that was done. And with today's technology, you can see it again. Right now, the DVR thing, you can rewind it and see it again. What the heck happened there? But so apparently the right wing has been brainwashed so completely by Putin and his Russian apparatus. Now, I got to tell you a little bit of background. Russia... And, France, for instance. France doesn't understand baseball. They have no idea what the hell baseball is. So when I'd go to France, during the time of the playoffs in the World Series sometimes, you couldn't find it on any... You get the International Herald Tribune, there'd be this little snippet way in the middle of the paper talking about the World Series. I mean, come on. But France and Russia in particular, they do not like American football. They just don't. They don't get it. They don't like it. And now, after all these decades, I got to tell you, the right wing is responsible for all this militaristic jingoist, let's fly over jets during the game. The beginning of the game, during the forced singing of the Star-Spangled Banner. So we do all of that for them. And then Russia brainwashes them, and now you can't find anybody who's a GOP member who likes watching football anymore. It was like, I wouldn't say it was sudden, but it's, quick enough. Some say, oh, it was because of Kaepernick taking a knee. Did you see Eminem take a knee? He was told not to. Well, Ed Sullivan told The Doors, Jim Morrison, you can't say light my fire either. Get me higher. That's what it was. Light my fire, take me higher. You couldn't say higher because that denoted drug use. Well, no. It means an exalted sense of awareness and knowledge. It doesn't have anything to do with drugs. Has everything to do with maybe being a sexual anarchist, though. So, yeah, Charlie Kirk was all up in arms. I think he got, what's the term now? Ratioed? Yeah, I'm just being rhetorical. I know what the term is. It's ratioed. And once again, I'll just repeat, he exposed his sexual predilections. I think that he's doing a little bit of solitary sexual anarchy while watching Mandingo. Yeah, usually that's the case. Because it gives him a sense of power. Which apparently there's a lot of white people who feel they lack now because they can't keep another human being underfoot. I just don't feel complete unless I can enslave another human being and then in my mind see they're not really fully human, so it's okay. Oh my God. And we're supposed to say that that's normal behavior? We're supposed to compromise with that? Give me a break. Actually, I'm quite tired of it. I'm tired of these Twitter users using the N-word with the hard R. No, I'm talking, Has a kind of Teutonic Germanic sense to it, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Yep. So, I guess, these same arguments we would hear about basketball. Oh, it's doing too much for the blacks. Except they didn't use the term black. They used the N-word with the hard R. And I guess because the halftime show had something to do with hip-hop songs from 25 years ago, now they're all up in arms. Where have these people been? Jesus. I know that there's stuff happening at the Grand Ole Opry, but you can break away from it every now and then. Come on, broaden your horizons. Jesus. And stop putting raisins in the potato salad, damn it. Whoever came up with that? Jesus. I think it was hide the flies. That's what I always thought as a kid. If there was raisins in the potato salad, look out for the flies. Okay, we all have family, and not all of them are exalted, knowledgeable, and evolved, are they? No, they're not. Well, we are beginning this great week in a great fashion now, aren't we? What is in this curated part of the salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Yes, at the top. We do need to be as organized as they are. Too bad we can't get Soros to get involved. How is it that the right-wing billionaire fascists from around the world, mind you, are able to push this anti-democratic bullshit and all their brown shirt activism, like that trucker convoy? Brown shirt bullshit. That's what that was. Didn't take very much, did it, to shut down the economy of two adjoining nations? Yeah, they're chalking that up. How is it that they're able to fund all their efforts and we can't get some, democratic principled, big, deep-pocketed money people helping us and organizing our stuff? Why can't we AstroTurf and get away with it? Oh, I forgot. We can't do what they do. Anyway, it's good to hear that parents are organizing against this onslaught of book burning and anti-intellectual know-nothings get to rule everything. The know-nothings are the ones who know nothing. That's why they're called know-nothings. They think they know everything, though. If you think you know everything, you might be a know-nothing. On the rest of the menu, states get the go-ahead to build a nationwide network of electric vehicle charging stations every 50 miles along interstate highways. Well, damn good. I'm sure the Nazis and the GOP will prevent that. And then we'll just say, hey, what about the Autobahn? The Republican-led West Virginia Senate rescinded the state's ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, declaring that it expired in 1979, so we don't need to worry about the little ladies now, do we? No, we don't. And a right-wing extremist ex-Air Force sergeant pled guilty to killing a federal guard during the 2020 police brutality protests and blaming it on Black Lives Matter. Did you hear that Laura Trump says that cities were literally burning to the ground because of Black Lives Matter? They're still carrying this trope. When you had this boogaloo boy killing people, killing law enforcement to try to start a race war because they're like Manson, I guess. I mean, they're going to put, they're going to like carve swastikas in the middle of their forehead now. And you had that. I remember an AutoZone on fire in some Midwestern town that turned out to be started by a Proud Boy Oathkeeper type. An Asian provocateur. Cities burning to the ground. Well, after the break, we move to the chef's table, where 3 members of the Canadian Special Forces are under investigation for their involvement in the anti-COVID trucker protest in Ottawa. And a former vice president of China Development Bank was arrested on suspicion of accepting bribes and facilitating other financial crimes. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link. And the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And yes, this is where we make the plea for funds, because we must. Soros ain't helicoptering in any funds for us. I don't know if he's doing it for anybody. Where is that guy? Anyway, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio by sending the funds of that espresso-type coffee drink to us once a month, what you might pay, if you could send that to us once a month, I got to tell you, it really helps. And thank you to those of you who have recently done so. It is so helpful because the costs keep going up, including the incessant upgrades and on software and hardware. All right. I have a pet peeve about planned obsolescence. I've had it since we were kids, even before Unsafe at Any Speed, if you remember that little tome. Yeah. Anyway, with that contribution or patronage that you extend to us once a month, it does allow us to pay those bills and continue the costly upgrading of software and hardware. And I got to tell you, by simply paying our bills, we are then able to fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of powerhouse of resistance, as we have existed for the last almost 11 years. That's right. In just about less than a couple of months here, we will be celebrating 11 years of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance radio. Who does that? Well, we like to think that we are dedicated to the principle of representative democracy, finding and electing more and better Democrats, or as we like to say, Democratic members of the Democratic Party. Yes, that's our mission statement. And because of your generosity, we have been able to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended. as Scalia told us so many years ago. Okay. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. And you and Kelly both, thank you for everything that you do around here. If you would follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. You know who they are. The show notes and links are an integral part to this multimedia operation we like to call this salon, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It's almost like one of those overhead projectors. Bullet points on overhead projecting. So, were you a member of the AV club in junior high and high school? Remember them? Audiovisual club? Yeah. Pushed an overhead projector down the hallways many a day. Many a day. So, yes, the show notes and links are where the real reportage is. So check that out. Don't rely on my humorous attempt at deconstructing what they really mean. Whatever that means. If you would follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. And, of course, Netroots Radio shows over all these almost 11 years can be found at the Internet Archive under the Netroots Radio library. You'll see them right there. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by the Associated Press, but I got it by way of the American Independent. States are getting the go-ahead to build a nationwide network of electric vehicle charging stations that would place new or upgraded ones every 50 miles along interstate highways as part of the Biden administration's plan to spur widespread adoption of the zero-emission cars. The administration announced the availability of $5 billion in federal money to states over 5 years under Biden's infrastructure law, sketching out a vision of seamless climate-friendly car travel from coast to coast. Urban Transportation Department requirements: states must submit plans to the federal government and can begin construction by this fall if they focus first on highway routes rather than neighborhoods and shopping centers that can allow people to take their electric vehicles long distances. Each station would need to have at least 4 fast charger ports, which would enable drivers to fully recharge their vehicles in about an hour. Go to lunch. I'm telling you, man, it's going to be a big-time drain when everybody wants to charge their car all at the same time, like, at lunch. But as the article continues, many technical details are to be worked out, like how do you accommodate everybody who wants to charge their car at lunch? And the administration acknowledges it will take work to persuade drivers accustomed to gas-powered cars, particularly in rural areas, because, I don't know, is it wrong to say they're backwards? The money is far less than the $15 billion that Biden had envisioned to fulfill a campaign promise of 500,000 charging stations by 2030, because if you're a Democratic member of the political spectrum and you make a promise, the Nazis and the GOP are going to make sure that promise will never be kept. And then they'll blame it on you. Now, the law provides an additional $2.5 billion for local grants planned for later this year to fill remaining gaps in the charging network in rural areas and in disadvantaged communities, which currently are less likely to own the higher-priced electric vehicles. States failing to meet all the federal requirements risk delays in getting approval from the Federal Highway Administration or not getting any money at all. Robbie of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Ash Mondays. The Republican-led West Virginia Senate moved quickly to rescind the state's ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment on Friday, declaring that it expired in 1979. I guess they had to do it because of all the sexual anarchy. All 23 Senate Republicans were sponsors of the measure, including 3 women. It passed on a voice vote without debate or discussion and now goes to the House of Delegates. In a statement later, Senate Minority Leader Stephen Baldwin of Greenbrier County said, "It is a sad commentary that in America in 2022, equal rights are still being debated. We should be moving forward, not backward. Women deserve to be treated equally under the law. That should not be controversial." And I guess every single one of those Republicans disagree. The ACLU of West Virginia chapter issued a statement that it will fight the resolution as it heads to the House. It is outrageous that the Senate would go back on its commitment that women should have equal rights to men, the ACLU said. West Virginia ratified the amendment in April of 1972, the same year that Congress sent it to the states. States were given 7 years to ratify. Then the deadline was extended to 82. The amendment was not approved by the required 3/4 of states before that deadline. In 2020, Virginia lawmakers approved the amendment, making the 38th and final state needed, but the Justice Department said in an opinion that month that the vote was too late. In March of 2021, a federal judge agreed, dismissing a lawsuit filed by 3 Democratic state attorneys general that had sought to force the federal government to recognize Virginia's vote. The West Virginia Senate resolution that was introduced last Thursday declared that the state's approval expired in 1979. In giving a description of the measure, Jefferson County Republican Patricia Rucker said, "It just clarifies that the resolution that was passed by the legislature is no longer valid." Well, when Rucker argued or urged adoption of the measure and asked if anyone had questions, no one else spoke. The voice was then taken, or the voice vote was then taken, and some in the chamber gave a no vote. It took about 75 seconds from the time the resolution was introduced to its adoption. Baldwin said it was moved to a vote immediately after Rucker described it, leaving no time for discussion. Olga R. Rodriguez of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A former U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant and member of the Boogaloo extremist movement pleaded guilty on Friday in the fatal shooting of a federal security officer in the San Francisco Bay Area amid large 2020 protests against police brutality. Stephen Carrillo, age 33, changed his plea to guilty to a federal murder charge in the killing of David Patrick Underwood and to the attempted murder of Underwood's colleague after federal prosecutors last month agreed not to seek the death penalty. The men were shot on May 29, 2020, while they stood in front of a federal building in Oakland as hundreds marched on the streets. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit in federal court, Carrillo read from a plea agreement admitting to posting messages on Facebook a day before the shooting, asking anyone if they were down to boog, and saying he was ready to act, not just talk. He also admitted firing 19 rounds from a homemade AR-15 rifle from the back of a white van being driven by a man he connected with online. Prosecutors on January 31st said they would not seek the death penalty, but U.S. District Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers said on Friday she was not convinced that she will accept the plea agreement between prosecutors and defense lawyers, calling for a 41-year prison sentence. I cannot accept a plea unless there was sufficient independent factual basis for the plea, she said. Carrillo is scheduled to be sentenced on June 3rd, but Gonzalez-Rogers warned that she could reject the plea agreement if she doesn't feel prosecutors and defense lawyers do enough to justify the sentence. And if she does, Carrillo would go to trial and his admissions in court could be used against him, Gonzalez-Rogers said. Prosecutors have said Carrillo of Santa Cruz has had ties to the Boogaloo movement, a concept embraced by a loose network of gun enthusiasts and militia-style extremists. The group started in alt-right culture on the internet with the belief that there is an impending U.S. civil war, meaning a race war. Authorities accused of Carrillo of fatally shooting Underwood after spraying a guard shack he was in with bullets. Underwood's sister, Angela Underwood Jacobs, called Carrillo a domestic terrorist during Friday's hearing. Prosecutors said Robert Alvin Justice Jr. of Millbrae drove the van. He faces charges of murder and attempted murder in the case. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, The Valley of the 70s. The latest Paul Thomas Anderson project is a hoot called Licorice Pizza, which stars Cooper Hoffman, Philip Seymour's kid, and successful alt musician Alana Hayam. Released last year but hitting wide release February 11th, the buzz here has been about the younger boy, older woman thing, which has produced some predictable responses. Supposedly semi-autobiographical, the setting is 70s Cali. High school kid and child actor Gary Valentine meets Alana Kane, a reluctant photographer's assistant on school picture day. And then we're off to the races. First, she serves as a chaperone when Gary's mom can't chaperone him on a set. After some minor drama with one of Gary's somewhat older associates, Alana and Gary become bickering friends and later business partners, selling water beds. It may seem strange to classify this one as a coming-of-age story, what with one of the characters being 25, but as things unfold, we see that Gary, though immature, is living as an adult. Alana, meanwhile, at 25, still is at home and is as immature as Gary thinks he's mature. So in a way, they're a perfect match. Their adventures all skirt real events and people in the era's San Fernando Valley, making this one particularly endearing to local industry vets. Worth the price of admission are over-the-top appearances from Bradley Cooper, Sean Penn, and Tom Waits as John Peters, William Holden, and Mark Robson, respectively, in various hijinksy situations. A local election and famous Japanese restaurant make it into the script, too, just like an L.A. record store from back in the day called, of course, Licorice Pizza. Loose, likable, and a good start for its leads, you'll wonder about those who can't dig it. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
The This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
In this year's Olympics, the top team performance has been corporate America's breathtaking double-twist ethical backflip. This group of corporate giants loudly tout their code of ethics, pledging to stand against repressive regimes that abuse human rights. But here came the Beijing Olympics, posing a direct test, and they flopped. Human rights advocates worldwide had asked that corporations withhold their sponsorship of the propagandistic use of the Olympics by China's brutally oppressive rulers. CEOs were simply asked not to endorse a Chinese dictatorship that is routinely committing acts of genocide and political suppression against Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hong Kong citizens, and others under their rule. Corporate leaders would not even have to speak out or publicly stand up to the oppressors. Just don't show up. Don't pay millions of their shareholders' dollars to link arms and reputations with rank repression. Well, if you've watched any of the Olympic broadcasts, you've seen which side corporate America chose. They've done a collective backflip from the high ethical bar of human rights into the pits of crass, unprincipled commercialism. A who's who of America's corporate all-stars are flying their flags in Beijing, having paid more than $1 billion to strut their stuff as sponsors of the regime's Olympic show. It looks bad, though, to admit that they value money over humanity, so sponsors are piously proclaiming that sports should not be politicized. As one put it, offending China's autocrats, quote, would not advance the cause of sport in which our commitment lies. Really? How sporting is genocide? Another barked that, quote, nobody cares what happens to Uyghurs, okay? No, it's not okay, and also not true. Yet another declared ski and sport have no business in politics. It's common sense. This is Jim Hightower saying, no, it's cowardice.
When the American colonists declared independence from Great Britain in 1776, they wrote that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. However, at the time of the Declaration, there were hundreds of thousands of enslaved African Americans who were denied these unalienable rights. Despite the fact that Thomas Jefferson was himself a slaveholder, he originally included this passage as a complaint against King George III. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. This passage, and others related to slavery, was removed by the Second Continental Congress. Thomas Jefferson later claimed it had been removed due to pressure from delegates from South Carolina and Georgia, and acknowledged that Northerners also had financial interests in keeping slavery alive. All of this foreshadowed later compromises on slavery in the drafting of the Constitution. This has been 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute. 60 Second Civics is a podcast of the Center for Civic Education. My name is Mark Gage.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. James Riddle Hoffa was born to a coal miner in Brazil, Indiana. Tragedy struck the Hoffa home in 1920 when at age 7, young Jimmy lost his father. In 1924, like many families in Brazil, the Hoffa family moved to Detroit, Michigan in search of work. At the age of 14, Hoffa left school to help support his family, where he found work in a Kroger grocery store warehouse. At the young age of 19, he led the warehouse workers in a successful strike. A year later, he joined the Teamsters Union. He rose quickly through the ranks, becoming vice president in 1952 and then president in 1957. Under Hoffa's leadership, the Teamsters Union grew to represent more than 2 million workers. Hoffa took a strong stance against racial discrimination, both within the Teamsters Union and in American society. In 1958, he wrote a letter to Teamster Union locals asserting his stance. He wrote, "As Americans, we should be opposed to bigotry and racial discrimination at every turn, and do everything possible to make the Bill of Rights a reality for every citizen." In 1964, Hoffa was able to bring nearly all of the nation's truck drivers under the National Master Freight Agreement, one of the very first industry-wide, nationwide multi-employer agreements, a powerful bargaining strategy for these workers. That same year, Hoffa was convicted for bribery. Rumors swirled about his alleged connections to organized crime. After his prison sentence was commuted by President Richard Nixon, Hoffa mysteriously disappeared in 1975. There are many conspiracy theories about the disappearance, fueling many television specials, films, and books. But these allegations and mysteries cannot diminish the lasting legacy of Hoffa's unwavering commitment to working people. Today, his son serves as president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, carrying on his father's legacy. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 35 degrees Fahrenheit under foggy conditions. Today's temperature will be much cooler than it has been over the weekend. And in fact, looks like we will have a few showers here in a couple of hours, and then a steady rain in the afternoon. Highs will be around 50. We were bumping 70 over the weekend. Winds will be out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and the daytime totals for precipitation looks like it will be bumping a quarter of an inch. Rain showers this evening and overcast skies overnight, with lows near 35, and it looks like we'll have, like it says, rain showers this evening and tapering off as we get to the morning. Cloudy tomorrow with highs in the low 50s, winds light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have increased once again, at least until Friday. We'll get the weekend totals updated after showtime tomorrow. But we have now increased as of Friday to 405,072 confirmed cases. The deceased remains at 448 confirmed. Pollen is rated as none outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is good at 22 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is back down to low at level 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.09 inches. Visibility is down to 3/4 of a mile, and relative humidity is at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 48 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 50 with rain. Rome is 57 degrees and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 35 and fair. Kabul is 35 and clear. Hong Kong is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 38 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 72 because, they're bumping into their summer there now. Partly cloudy in Sydney, Australia at 71 degrees Fahrenheit. And San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and cloudy. And New York is a freezing 19 degrees Fahrenheit. But at least it's sunny. And that is weather from around the world. Brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Anonymous staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. 3 members of the Canadian Special Operations Forces are under investigation for supporting the protests against COVID-19 restrictions in Ottawa, the Department of National Defense said yesterday, Sunday. Commander Major General Stephen Boyven said in a statement that an investigation was launched after senior leadership was made aware on the 1st of February that one member was possibly involved. On February 10th, another investigation was initiated to look into the involvement of the other 2 members. The Canadian Special Operations Forces Command does not condone its members supporting and or actively taking part in causes that jeopardize the apolitical imperative associated with their functions, he said. The department did not detail how the 3 unidentified members were involved in the demonstrations. The so-called Freedom Convoy protests started in the national capital, Ottawa, by Canadian truckers opposing a vaccine or quarantine mandate for cross-border drivers, entered its 17th day on Sunday. Of course, 98% of the truckers are already vaccinated. What? The members were already in the process of being released from the Canadian Armed Forces.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more staff at Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A former vice president of China Development Bank, He Xingxing, was arrested on suspicion of accepting bribes, the China Supreme People's Protectorate said on Sunday yesterday, amid a series of probes into officials at state financial firms. He is also suspected of issuing financial bills in violation of regulations, illegally issuing loans, and concealing overseas deposits. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on. And we will meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.